You good?
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for joining, everybody. Really excited to be here. I see a couple of familiar faces and lots of you I don't know, but yeah, I'll make a quick introduction. First, let me just share my screen with the deck um, and we can get going. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Amazing, amazing. So, yes, as I mentioned, my name is Eki and I'm an account executive at Scribe. So I At Scribe, we help founders find angels with data. And that just give me a second, actually. 1 second. There's this Zoom situation that I need to work through. No, I think it should be fine. Um, Sorry, I'm gonna revert this.
It looks totally fine on our end. I don't know if that.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I don't see um something that I need to see. So I'm just going to um yep. Okay, here we go. So yeah, I'm kind of going back. So at Scribe, we help founders find angels with data. So we've been working with pre-seed, seed founders for over a year and a half, and so far we worked with over 350 clients, all getting um, relevant investor meetings, some more, some less, and most getting checks. Um, Across both B2B, B2C, and absolutely different industries and verticals. Um, a little bit about myself. So I've led sales at two startups so far. At Scribe, my clients are early stage startups. I absolutely love working with founders. Previously, I had a short 6 months engagement at another startup that targeted angels and angel syndicates. So I actually spoke with over 300 angels at that time. I went to a few conferences, events. So I think I really kind of learned a lot about how angels think and how they invest. I also used to work at a family office back in Canada of a fashion retail entrepreneur. That's kind of how I got to love working with founders and entrepreneurs. And yeah, that's just the part of my story. I also kind of know how, very high level institutional investors think as well from that one experience. Um, so on today's agenda, we're going to talk about three things. Number one is where to find angels, and secondly, how to reach angels, and of course, how to get check from an angel. What are your best strategies? Um, as Purdy mentioned, we will do kind of a 30-minute, 20, 25, 30-minute presentation, and yeah, just feel free to then later ask questions or pop them in the chat. So before we dive in, I wanted to briefly mention that um, most UK funding rounds are actually from angels and not VCs. We hear a lot in the news about, large VC rounds in publications like Sifted, and often the smaller angel rounds go unnoticed. But there's a lot of activity in the angel space, even though it doesn't get picked up by the news. Few other notes worth mentioning is the fact that the majority of angels invest kind of in a range of 10 to 25,000, and it really ranges from 1,000 to over 1 million. So there is, unless an angel has a mandate, there is really like an infinite opportunity. However, kind of targeting that 10 to 25 as a minimum is a good idea. When it comes to demographics, I don't have this data on my deck, but I also find it interesting to say that 86% of angels are male, 70% are white, and just under 2/3 are in the 45 to 64-year-old bracket. So that type of demographic we also have to keep in mind when reaching out to angels, and that just paints a picture of the type of people that angels are. Um, and raising from angels is really not easy. Um, the very sophisticated angels get bombarded with decks. They they receive 50 to 200 decks a week. I heard from different angels. It is very much like kissing frogs. You meet a lot of people who claim they're angels. You reach out to people might not be relevant for you. So it does take time to find the right one. It is very competitive, especially in the early stage, finding the right angel and finding and standing out in the competition of founders. Of course, when you're a first-time founder, especially, you might have a small network of potential investors, and that could play a role in the difficulty. And last but not least, fundraising is sales. So often you're learning how to sell while fundraising, and it is definitely a task. I've learned to sell myself and still learning, of course, in the last year and a half. And it is a process that you kind of need to learn as you go. Um, so let's dive into the first subject. So in terms of how to find angels, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. So first of all, if you adopt the mindset that angels are people, they are everywhere. What really differentiates angels from VCs is that the fact that they invest their own capital. So, they're walking around us, they're in different places, and kind of adopting that mindset first and foremost is going to help you and give you an edge. So beyond friends and family, I kind of split this on the slide from the warmest to the coldest. So beyond friends and family, really tap into your personal network. So maybe tap into your ex-colleagues, university alumni. Just leverage the trust you already established due to your association with that organization. You can create angels. It does take time, but from there, you might have some of the most engaged and most supportive network. Of course, ask for introductions from founders and investors. It is also one of the most trustworthy association when a founder or an investor recommends you as a potential opportunity to another investor. First of all, it shows trust and the fact that that founder is valuing you and valuing your your product and your personality enough to show it to someone who they um, have an incredible relationship with. Um, thirdly, you can leverage your existing or prospective clients. I've heard people do that. It is trickier. I think works better in B2B space, but you can, if your target market is lawyers and you're approaching different law firms, you could also potentially reach out to those lawyers. They're usually very well paid, and potentially look for investment from them. I also want to mention events, and I absolutely love events that Hotbed puts on with rare founders. And without it's really an amazing place to meet both investors and founders. And again, going with that mentality that you might meet a founder that might open the door for you down the road, rather than just going to events and kind of be on the hunt for investors. It's not the best. The best is to kind of go out there and find what are some potential potential future opportunities might come out of it. And finally, I'd love to talk about data. So this is what we're going to spend a little bit more time on this because that's what we specialize in. And I find when I've discovered Scribe after working with angels, I just really realized that it's such a cool thing that in the UK, we do have the data on angel investment activity. It is publicly available. It is really hard to get, but like really hard to find and put it into the right format. But it is available and founders can use it to target individuals that um, will be relevant for them. So when it comes to data, there are really three data points. I will add fourth as well. But the three core data points that you want to look at while you are searching for investors, number one is investments in the same industry. Um, you want to look at find people who have existing relevant commitment to another startup, to another industry that is in your space. That shows you they've already done it, and there is a higher likelihood that they will do it again. In terms of recency of investment, it is extremely important. I found that with angels that I was speaking to, they spend maybe a year or two deploying the capital, maybe they got from exiting a business, or they are just kind of continuously doing it for the tax benefits. Um, and they do it for a few years and then they wait until the exit. So for the people that are deploying now, it is important to find the people that are deploying capital now. I mean, there are some people who do it, yeah, every single year. It is more rare, but it does. Those are the serial angels, but that of course happens a lot too. When it comes to check size, you really want to see, and again, that's amazing that we have the data available in the UK. You want to see that they have the proof of the capital, and you also want to gauge what can you ask them. When you have those conversations about potential investments, if you have the data on how much they've invested before, it obviously gives you um, kind of an edge to know what to ask, whether it could be too low or too high, um, etc. So I wanted to do a quick demo of how a founder would use our data at Scribe. So just give me a second. I will switch my screens and then, yeah, just one moment. Do you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Amazing. So when it comes to finding investors, um, at using the data that we have, um, the founder would usually select an industry, as I mentioned. One of the things that you'll need to be looking for, like let's say, so let's select healthcare and social care. Um, you can specify investment period. I usually recommend founders look at the last couple of years. Again, it might be better to look just super close, but if investment happened in the last couple of years, that also um, that's good enough. And the check size, I always put in 10,000 just as a minimum. And I'd click on individuals. And so what the system's going to show me is the name of the investor. Sometimes the system catches a few um, institutional investors too, but for the most part, is going to be individual names, company they've invested in, how much they've invested in, their investment date, when that company was incorporated. Also, another point that could be useful when you're searching for angels, if they're investing in companies that are incorporated pretty recently, that also shows that they are interested in kind of developing um, the company and being an angel. And from here, a founder would usually add someone to their list, then they would show up on their list, and from there they could start the outreach. I've also seen founders use this database for finding specific names of investors that they already know. It works in some cases, and sometimes it doesn't. I think when it doesn't is when someone has invested through a syndicate. But when it does, it shows you, different people that have invested in across multiple industries. And I think I'll end the demo here and then we'll go back to my deck. Just give me a second.
Aki, as you're pulling up the deck, can I ask, do you have data on the average number of investors, angels that founders contact and like what a good conversion rate is?
Yeah, of course. I do have that. So with 350 founders, with around 300, we worked when we just provided them the database and they took it away and we rely on them to report what the conversion rate is like. But starting in June, We worked with over 50 founders when we ran campaigns for them. We've done a little beta. I know one of the members here today is from our beta, which is great. I think Ben from Smarty Plants, maybe he's in here. Oh, so is Bio. So we ran a beta where we learned how to outreach, and obviously have seen that we target about 20% LinkedIn acceptance rate. We target about 5 to 7 meetings per founder when reaching out cold to around 700 investors. So, and then of course, when it comes to check, like some get one or two, some get a few more, and conversion timeline. That's something that I'm going to touch on the future slides. But conversion timeline, it really does depend. So yeah, just one moment, I will share. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting.
All right. So in terms of outreach and how to reach out to angels. So fundraising is nothing different from sales, and you should be treating it like sales. You want to create your fundraising funnel. You want to capture as many relevant investors at the top. And of course, I want to reiterate relevant. You don't want to be reaching out to thousands of investors that you just, found, and then they might not have absolutely relevant investment activity. It's just not a good use of your time. And of course, to the first step from the outreach, your goal is to always get that meeting. And I will touch on how do we recommend our clients after the iteration of over 50 campaigns, as well as after speaking to, I think I probably spoke to over 500, 600 founders in the last few months. This is what really works. So when it comes to getting the meeting cold, you want to start with LinkedIn. You want to send a LinkedIn connection request, but it could be something very simple, one-liner message. The follow-up, as soon as someone responds, you want to kind of give them a bit more of why you reached out and give them a relevant past investment that they made an investment in, if you know that. That really kind of shows the relevancy. Later on, you follow up with a calendar link, and if that doesn't trigger the response, we really see founders do well when they send a video that is very personal. It's 30 seconds. It's not personalized directly to that specific investor, but it is personal enough to show the kind of the like founder's personality. And then if LinkedIn doesn't work, which we've seen, it works really, really well, but if it doesn't work, then we move into the email. You kind of reshare some of the information you've shared on LinkedIn, you follow up, and then you always end. You kind of want to put an end where you ask for anybody who might be interested, and you will say that you're not going to send any more emails. Actually, after that final end, often people come back and say like, "Oh, you're no longer speaking to me. I mean, you're no longer reaching out to me. Now let me look at your materials that you've sent." So it's an interesting bit where people see kind of that scarcity at the end, and then they end up converting to having discussion. So there are a couple of lessons that actually last week Rob, co-founder of Scribe, shared, and a few of the people who are at this here today, they actually went to that webinar last week, not year. And I think some of the core lessons that we've learned from those 50 outreach campaigns, we really wanted to distill them down on kind of do's and don'ts. So the number one is, if you're early, just soften the language. If pre-revenue, if you're just starting the fundraise, it is best to say you're looking for advice, you're looking for guidance, you want to get connected. If you are, 3/4 of the way in your fundraise and you really need to kick in the gears, then you have like reaching out to investors and saying, I'm fundraising and I'm looking for to close the round is absolutely fine. Generally, meetings are hard to get, but likely will result in investment. Investor selection matters more than outreach messaging, as I mentioned with LinkedIn. Just reaching out with something simple. It is easier for some industries than others. We've seen it's been easier for like B2B fintech, probably just by the nature of the fact that we're in London. There's a lot of finance and a lot of people who've made money in finance. And of course, B2C is a bit harder in general. Especially we see the most difficult one would be consumer apps. Um, as I mentioned, I think I'll breeze through this. LinkedIn is more effective than email. You have to stay organized and build a CRM and follow up. And the last one, I think, again, it's a hard pill to swallow, but ideally you want to start building those relationships before you need to fundraise, before you have that kind of pressing timeline that you're running out of funds and you really, really need to. And I've seen the best founders do it when they approach it as a continuous engagement until they really don't need angels anymore, until they move into kind of like Series A and beyond. And a last bit, I would love to talk about moving from meeting to a check. So first of all, I want to make again that distinction between VCs and angels. Angels are people. Angel investing is deeply personal and you have to establish a relationship over time. Even super angels, I've been to an early stage investment summit last year where Chris Adelsbach was speaking, who is a serial fintech investor with, I think, over 100 investments under his belt. He said that he doesn't invest into a company unless he knows them roughly 6 months. And a few other investors mentioned the same thing. So, kind of expecting the results to be really quick is probably not the right approach. However, we've also seen, for example, I think I mentioned earlier that we've seen with the outreach that we've done for founders, the earliest commitment was 7 days. And of course, there are going to be situations where someone would commit very quickly. But you want to shift your focus from you to them and understand them and what their needs are, first of all, like in any sales experience. Um, so I wanted to briefly talk about why angels invest. And number one is the financial reasons. And I put a little crown here because I think financial reasons are king. Without them, angels would just be, um, you know, putting money into charities. Like they really want to they're looking for those returns. They're looking for tax breaks. Tax breaks come with a timeline. They're annual. So there are some timing stuff that you could work with. And they want to diversify their investment portfolio. But what I find often gets underlooked is the other reasons, the professional, social, and personal. So some angels want to leverage their industry expertise and support innovation and latest technology. Some want to, network with other angels, network with other founders, expand their influence in the space. Some, again, many of the ones I've spoken to, they say, I invest, if some of my friends or a group of my like colleagues invest, like that, creating that FOMO effect that if someone around them is doing it, they want to do it as well. And of course, on the personal level, they might have just an interest or passion in the subject. Um, they want to give back to the community. And in many cases, they just like the guy or the girl. And of course, not just, I think the financial comes first, but then you have to understand that those dynamics, actually play a decent role in their decision-making process. So how do we match their why? So the first thing I mentioned with financial reasons being the most important, you want to kind of have these three things as your kind of non-negotiables. You want to articulate the upside potential with confidence always. You want to understand their timeline and how they think. If you come into them and say that you're raising now, you're looking for lead angel and you want to close the round within a month, the lead angel is not going to, they're probably not going to get into it unless you already have a very established personal relationship. I spoke with an angel last week at an AI Forge event, and they mentioned that they had questions that they ask themselves every time they make a decision whether to invest into someone or not. So does this idea have a 100x potential? Does this founder have an ability to execute? So sharing monthly updates, sharing your journey on LinkedIn, if you're connected with them, giving kind of providing them, maybe talk a bit more about your background, is if you're a founder with more mature and rich work experience, like that, all of that shows your ability to execute. And then these things in the middle, I kind of call them value add interactions. So those are the things that you could do in addition. When you know that someone, they're really looking to network through being an angel, or they want to, they love this technology that you're working on, and you want to add, you don't want to add to their experience and give them um, more value than you're asking from them. So if they are, their industry leader, you want to maybe invite them to speak at events or ask for industry related advice. You want to, if they're looking to network, name drop investors, like again, if appropriate, and maybe invite to join at events. I've also had experience with an angel saying that he just like when a founder kept inviting him to different events that he was part of, he felt like, he was really excited to be part of the community and be he's seen the influence the founder has in the community, and then he decided to invest. And something I wanted to mention is the funding round deadline. It is something that works really well to create the FOMO effect, but it also could backfire if you don't meet the deadline. So I would be mindful of it when speaking with angels early. If you're just having, first few introductions, then you want to more understand what their timeline is and how they make a decision, and then adopt to it. But if you're, very close to closing the round, then having that timeline, of course, is absolutely fine. And yeah, last but not least, I think everything you do more than once is should be a process. So if you're reaching out to multiple angels and you're doing it consistently, making sure that you have a process in mind that, once you've done the outreach, you got to the meeting, and post meeting, you also have a process. So my thinking is um, kind of start, yeah, after the meeting, you layer in those value add interactions. It might take one, it might take 10, but in eventually, if the angel is responsive to it, I think you're going to close. But again, there's unfortunately no magic pill on how to do it. But I hope this was a little helpful in helping understand angels a little bit more. Yeah, and I think on that, like on this note, I'm going to end my presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
There is a question that just came up in the chat that might be useful to run through, but if anyone has any
Yeah.
specific questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. So John asked where your data comes from. So are you taking it from Companies House? Do you screen out single investment angels or people that are not going to invest more than once?
Yes, that's a great question. So first of all, absolutely correct. We do get the data from Companies House. And the second question, so we don't take out single ticket investors, but we do take out founders of companies or like company directors. If they are a director in the company, obviously, like some of them might be putting in money. The reason we don't take out the single investors because it's I absolutely agree that the frequency and number of investments like it definitely will show the fact that the angel is serious and they do it on the regular basis. However, if they've done one, there's also a chance that it might do it again, even if they've invested in a friends and family round before. You know, when it really, I think you don't want to limit those chances, opportunity to connect with them. Um, yeah, well, thank you for, yeah. Any other questions?
Do you want to take screen share off just so we can?
Oh, yes. Great idea. Okay, Ankur, yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for showing us your platform as well. Do you in the platform have information around what rounds have the investors invested in, pre-seed, seed, Series A, etc.? Is that available?
No, and just to answer your question quickly, no, it's not available, but you can gauge it by the amount of investment. So if someone invests in that kind of, if you see, we basically can see how much the total the company has raised. And if it raised, you know, maybe 250 to 500K, that would be pre-seed. If it raised maybe a million and above, would be seed. So you can gauge it. Like we don't say it on, and we don't have a tag and that says that, but you can definitely get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions or comments?
Do you have any information on with the sequence that you went through with LinkedIn into email, the best content that people have written on, I'm guessing the connection request, because you only have 200 or 300 characters, depending on whether you have a premium membership or not, like the best way to optimize that message so that people accept the request so that you can then send a longer message afterwards?
Yes. Yeah. So actually what we found is less is more. And if you send like a blank invite, it actually works really well. Maybe because it's not immediately known to the angel that you're reaching out for money. Like you're just connecting, you're not asking them of anything, you're not providing them with anything, you just want to connect. And we found that that actually works best. And then the follow-up is a very brief message outlining that, you know, hey, James, I've seen that you've invested in X company. We are currently building something in, you know, this space. Would love to get your feedback, advice, and connect as someone who is knowledgeable. It's something very simple, just kind of giving them a little bit, and then later on layering in the calendar invite with a bit more like points on traction, as well as a video that is more personal.
We've had the same feedback actually, that especially with the kind of AI automated messages now, people almost expect more to see the message and it to be automated. So when they don't see a message with a connection request, they're more likely to accept, like psychologically. So that's interesting that you've got the same feedback.
Yeah, yeah.
Question from Wes.
Yeah, Wes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so that's basically answered my question, really. So would you always do that?
Yes. So now we always do that. So for clients that we've done, you know, different approaches, again, that's how we've learned that this is the best way. I mean, obviously, like if you have, let's say, if you have a connection with that person that you could say, hey, I've noticed you connected with this person, would love to connect. Like if you like completely cold, you don't know the person, there's no like absolutely no connection to them, I would just go blank. If you have some level of association with them, I think you could leverage that depending on how, you know, deep and strong that association is.
Okay. But definitely go that way and not message, because it can connect or message, can't you? So you would just send a connect request and that would be it.
Yeah, that's what we would do. Yeah.
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
of course.
And I'm
James?
guessing you're saying with the, if you do send a message, there's still no ask in that message, even if it's like, oh, I see we're both connected to blah, would love to connect. It's not actually, here's my pitch and da 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 da, and I want this from you.
No, yeah. So when it comes to sending pitches and pitch decks, we actually, in the outreach that we do, we never send pitch decks. And we take some maybe points from pitch decks that would be relevant. Again, traction points, investor, like path commitments, but we would never send a pitch deck because that just comes off as like blah, like here it is. I'm here to like just take me. Whereas you still want to maintain that level of interest. You want to get the meeting. Your goal is not to just share and hope for the best. Your goal is to get face to face with the investor. That's why you have to be very concise and pretty deliberate in what you're saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. James.
Okay. Everything you guys have just said about putting that blank request in, I've been doing. And I've just literally changed tact with this because the counter argument is that you get a load of false positives. You get more connection acceptances, but then they're not, as you go further down the validation. But just thought I'd share that. But the question I've got for you is actually around when do you share the pitch? So if you've just kind of talked about it a little bit there about the goal is to get the conversation. So I've got like an initial connection, an automated follow-up message, which probably is a little bit too long, but it's more about trying to get that engagement you're talking about. Do you ask for that calendar? Do you ask for that, you hear your thoughts? Or if in that follow-up message, that second interaction, what should be the very subtle call to action that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think the subtle call to action, I'd say don't share the link yet, the calendar link yet. Ask for advice, feedback, maybe like, again, coffee is a bit too strong, but I think just, yeah, like advice, feedback, not like let's hop on a 15-minute call, but something about like, I just want to like, and if a person says, yes, sure, which again, it doesn't put too much on them to like book the call and how like they already like, okay, like maybe I could entertain this. And then they could say, yes, sure. Then you can say, here's my calendar link when works for you, etc. So, but then in the kind of that's the call to action. And then the body, we've been putting in kind of just, yeah, again, just a little bit. Like I've seen you invested in X, we're building Y, and I think like as an expert, I would love to get your thoughts. And then in the later follow-up, if they don't respond to that, that's when you want to put in kind of a bit more information. Say, we've had X amount of like traction, we have X amount of users, like the market is this big, we have these investors on board, like kind of, again, not maybe all at once, but pick a couple that feel the stronger, like seem the strongest to you at the moment, and then go with that. So, but that's, I would like wait for like the third follow up for that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
If you don't
Of course.
their email address, would you continue that sequence on LinkedIn?
Good question. I think in that case we would stop. We would probably stop. And then one beautiful thing about LinkedIn is that once you're connected, they see your updates. And again, we hear it again and again from different founders that after a founder has been connected with an angel for a few months, without actually having a meeting, they were now interested in a meeting because of what that founder has been posting. So it is very much, that's one of the like, biggest positives of LinkedIn versus email, whereas email is done. And then unless you're on the mailing list, you're not going to get any emails from the founder.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, because I get quite a lot of messages from people that are fundraising. And one of the things that stands out the most to me is when someone sends that like metric style update. And then that's when I'm like, oh, okay, actually, this is quite interesting. which is almost like the monthly update that they would send via email, but they've sent it via LinkedIn instead. But it's just like enough for me to think that they're gaining momentum and that it might be
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I also think that what you mentioned is that I'm talking about like initial outreach, but then that continuous engagement. I think that's what those are the things that kind of, even then you haven't gotten the meeting, but you could kind of put in some of the value add in those interactions, whereas, you know, showing again, showing your traction, if you have ability to message the person, you know, maybe, you know, sharing some information that is not relevant directly to your business. So you could do that. But I think like for the initial outreach, you would end at some point and then start re-engaging if maybe a few like week, maybe months later.
Yeah, thank you. Rory.
Hi, thanks. So yeah, just building on the kind of false positives point that James made. I was just wondering if you have any data for that kind of that next stage in the funnel, because my approach has been that my opening message on LinkedIn, I'll use an opening message and it will say, "Hi, investor. I saw you invested X in X, which would be a company in our sector. Are you still looking at retail tech opportunities? Would love to connect if so." And I feel that then even if they don't read the message, but they do connect, I can then follow up. So, you know, my email will say LinkedIn follow up / you know, some of our key metrics. And then it just feels like I'm kind of not really using up any goodwill there, because even if they didn't read the LinkedIn message and they're like, what's this guy on about? They can go back and see that actually the ask was, you know, here's what we're doing. If it's relevant, connect. So it kind of, whereas I feel like, yeah, you might get, as James said, a lot more false positives, just, you know, because it's so easy to connect to. If someone's just like, blank message, you're like, well, you know, why not, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's totally a valid point. But I think if we talk about the top of the funnel and, you know, clicking on connect request, or like in our case, we automate it for our clients, but it's very simple. And that false like it is very simple. And if it's a relevant investor, and they might be a false positive, as in, you know, they might not be like, oh, I'm ready, I'm interested. But the fact that they've accepted, that's already positive. And then if you follow up and you do it, you know, if you follow up and then you post on LinkedIn, and I'm not saying that it's guaranteed success, but that connection is already a success. And if it's a relevant investor that you believe that could be a great addition to the cap table, then you can continue kind of building up from there.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thanks.
Of
Can I jump
course.
in with a question? What do you suggest if you reach out to an angel investor under the pretense of, hey, I want some advice, I want your feedback, but you obviously know that there's a clear ask in your mind, that, you know, you have for the angel. What's the best way to, I guess, diplomatically bring up, do you want to invest?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So do you mean like at the meeting or after the meeting or like
Yeah.
or during the outreach?
If you, let's say you reach out to an angel that you really want to close with, and you say, hey, I want your advice, I want your feedback, and they're like, okay, great, I'd love to give you feedback. But are you doing kind of like, I presume you're doing like a soft sell as you're telling them, you know, what you do and what you want feedback on, and then at what point is it appropriate to bring up the, hey, I'm raising, do you want to invest bit?
That's a really great question. I think I wouldn't do it on the first meeting. I would keep it I would keep it to the ask. And I might ask, or like I basically would create like a follow-up afterwards that is going to be either, oh, like we've learned, like we've learned about the angel that, you know, they like to like they like to golf, like I don't know, like it's or I mean, it sounds very personal, but you've learned something about the person and you want to use that to get the next meeting, kind of the next value add. And then I'd say like maybe after the second meeting, I would bring it up kind of, again, depending on, sorry, I want to backtrack a little bit. So again, you kind of have to gauge from the angel. If an angel is completely, they're, yes, like they're willing to give advice, But if they're already saying like like I obviously like I angel invest, and in that case, you like if they bring it up, then you have to kind of take it in and just run with it. But you don't bring it up in the first meeting. I think because even though it would just sound like a complete like qualifying call, and then the person, if they say no, then you close the door. And I'd say like the second meeting would be ideal.
Okay, that's useful. Thanks. Anka.
Yeah, Anchor, please go ahead.
Um, when looking for angels, do you consider the location? So, for example, I'm London based. I mean, I'm by default, I obviously look at angels from London.
Mhm.
But what's your view on, locations and how they matter? Is it other parts in the UK, Europe, US?
So locations matter tremendously. I mean, countrywide wise for sure. There's also, if you are based in different regions in the UK, there's different angel networks, and some angels invest specifically in that region. And I think London, obviously, it has the highest competition, but also highest concentration of all types of investors. Um, so I would say when it comes to, there's two layers. So countrywide, it matters because of all of the tax benefits and like local understanding of the market that those angels have. And like regionally, I think it affects it if, they want to give back to that specific region, or again, they understand the market in that region a bit more. And I'd say London is, it's a very, very, like it's a varied place. You can find any type of angels here, but regionally, they're kind of more focused on their own regions. But countrywide, so if in terms of, let's say, like trying to raise from the US, I've seen a few founders mention that if they raise from an angel in the US, um, and again, people say that convincing angels in the US is easier. They're kind of going from that initial meeting to the check is faster, but it often requires a move to the US. It often requires expansion into the US market almost right away. So it comes with certain, um, not, I guess, certain things that you have to be aware of. And
Certain strategy changes. Makes sense. Okay.
exactly,
Cool.
exactly. Yeah. Oh,
Rohit, we had a question from you in the chat, but we might need a little
mhm.
more context. Do you want to take out yourself off mute and ask it?
Yeah, sure. Uh, I mean, I'm definitely interested in the insights on the investor portfolio. So, could you please elaborate more on that?
Investor portfolio, do you mean like,
Yes, like
so I guess,
yeah. So basically, there are different companies investors keep a track of, and the way they invest is called the portfolio, right? So they
yeah,
have
yeah.
a list of the companies. So just if you could elaborate more on how you can help, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I think the number one, I'll touch on two things. So one is generally if an angel invest invested into one industry, they're more likely to invest in the same industry. Um, there's also this notion of if an angel could invest in just one vertical and just continue with one because they understand it. But most of the things that I've seen, because it is both personal and professional, some invest. Let's say, like, I'll give you an example of one angel that I worked with last year. He invests in fintech because he comes from finance. He invests in sports because he loves sports. He invests in um, and beverages because he loves beverages too. And I think those this is like this
Mm-hmm.
strategy of an angel. It is to combine their passion for innovation in different spaces. And so that's kind of generally I've seen how they think. I mean, there's also, as I mentioned, there are some people who are just like hyper focused on one area. And some that just whichever opportunity comes to them. So with our database, you could see if an angel made multiple investments, you could see if they're on the cap table, you could see that if they've made it across different industries or within one. And you can also look into those companies and see, you know, if there's maybe an underlying technology that they're using. So
So that was interesting. Yeah, thanks.
yeah, of course. There is a question from David. David or David? I'm
Yes.
sorry if I'm
No,
mispronouncing
it's
your
okay.
name.
Davide, but it's okay.
Davida, that's nice.
Maybe you said it at the beginning while you were going through your presentation, maybe I missed it. If we want to engage with you, what do we need to do and how does that work after?
Oh, yeah. So if you want engagement, first of all, I'll actually reshare my slide really quickly so you can guys scan my. To investors themselves.
Eki, I think you're frozen. I can't tell if I'm frozen or if you are.
I think it's her. I had the
I
same.
think it's her, yes.
But the QR code is there if anybody wants to see.
No.
We'll give her a minute if she comes back.
I think I've made just about every outreach error. I think I've done like the exact opposite in my strategy than what she suggested. From like not sending an outreach message and just connecting with people on LinkedIn without anything. And I've sent the deck to just about everyone I've put a cold outreach message to. Oops.
Is Adam still in the meeting? Because, oh yeah, he is. Maybe
Yeah.
comment about a different approach that Eva was talking through. Adam, I don't know if you're able to take yourself off mute, but have you tried anything that Eva suggested? And what was the learnings?
Am I the only Adam in the call?
Yeah, you're the Adam that I'm referring to.
Well, I mean, obviously, I've got a couple of techniques that I use generally in contacting people. So, yes, I've attempted both the strategies on LinkedIn. I agree. Sometimes a blank message is actually the best way. You certainly seem to get the equivalent response, which is sometimes no response, but the connection is formed, and then you're able to make that process of connecting via short messaging, and then eventually longer messaging. And I also will try and any opportunity to meet people in person. So I try and work out where they're going to be, probably about a 2 to 3 week lead time. So yes, on that front.
Interesting.
I don't know if you wanted me to follow on. There was the alternative approach where I use a different connection tool. Did you want me to talk about that?
What's with Eva's strategy? Does she say that in that initial message that you send on LinkedIn, you add a note?
So again, I do and I don't. It much depends on what the profile of the investor is, or contacts in general, to be honest. So I will look at whether I think they are writing longer posts. If they look like they go more in depth, then I'll try and actually put a message forward. If I think they are quite flippant, and if I tend to think that their communication style is that they are very short form, then that's the ones I wouldn't send a message to.
Interesting. That's an interesting idea. So psychologically profiling the investor and communicating to them in the way that you think they want to be communicated with by how they're putting content out. Thanks.
I
Yeah,
think
I mean, there is one other part, and that's if they've been referred to me to reach out to. So I will always then ask those that have contacted that investor what their style of approach was to them, but equally how they were referred to them, and then what response they got initially. So did they use a short form outreach, or did they go more in depth?
I think we've just got Eki back, and we're right at time, and we'll move into our next term sheet session shortly with 7 Legal. But Eki, thank you so much for joining us. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add. Before you froze, we had the QR code up on the screen, so everyone's got your details, and we'll send over the deck as well after the after today's call. Oh, you're on mute, by the way.
I just wanted to thank you guys all so much. And yeah, we lost internet in the office, so I'm on my phone.
I know.
Hopefully this was helpful. Yeah, and if anybody wants to connect, you know, both just chatting about angels or do a Scribe demo, I'm available anytime. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks. We'll post Ecky's LinkedIn profile into the chat as well. I'm just going to stop recording and then start recording again very